This is going to be a brief positive, so don't get used to it, but this movie is perfectly enjoyable as a fun high school action comedy. They go around the world, and there are a lot of comedic set pieces I'm sure that people will enjoy. There, that's my praise. Click away if you get triggered easily. 3, 2, 1. This is the first time I didn't plan on making a video on a film before watching it, but Far From Home did it. This is the most I've had to say about a film since Ready Player One. So sit back and enjoy yourself if you don't like Far From Home, and if you are a fan of it, this might not be the video for you. Here we go. I really do feel bad for Tom Holland here, because I really think he's a great actor and doing his best with his material. He does his best giving emotion and character to this caricature goof that Disney has written for him. I hate to say it, but the only MCU iteration of Spider-Man that I've actually liked is the one in Civil War. That one had money problems, he was diving through dumpsters for items, and he was a hero because of his sense of responsibility, because he knew about his powers and he wanted to help the little guy, not because he wanted to be an Avenger or try and impress Tony Stark. That Spider-Man didn't want Aunt May to find out because he knew that she would disapprove and want to keep him safe. It's never been done before, and when the MCU finally does it, they turn it into a joke where she supports him risking his life as Spider-Man, even though he's only 16 years old and died recently while being a hero, not being able to save himself. And when he tries to not be a hero and just be Peter Parker, she gives him the suit and forces him to be a hero and put himself in danger, because I guess Aunt May likes Spider-Man. Wouldn't she feel a sense of protection for her adopted son and try to keep him safe? She died too, getting a first hand on why it's so dangerous, and yet it's played as a joke, and she's just perfectly comfortable pushing Peter into dangerous situations. Also, the thing about May is, who is she? Who is May? We know who she was in the Raimi trilogy, we know who she was in the Spectacular Spider-Man, and we even see her in the Amazing Spider-Man movies as a relatable character just trying to make enough money for her and Peter to get by. Do you think any of the other Mays would just accept Peter as Spider-Man? And I'm not trying to rag on this version of Spider-Man for being different, but they need to show emotional stakes and consequences to actions. Otherwise, we can't relate to the man in Spider-Man. It's okay that Aunt May found out about Peter being Spider-Man. It would even be okay if she finally accepted it, but for them to just completely ignore it and play it off as a mere throwaway joke at the end of Homecoming, that's insulting to me. Why would I care that the whole world knows that Peter is Spider-Man if it doesn't even matter that May knows? They'll probably just play it off as one big joke, fucking with the audience again. I'm sorry, guys. I guess this is a good time to get to my next big issue, the consequences. This was also my biggest problem with Homecoming, the consequences. There are none. Peter gets off scot-free for everything he does wrong in that movie, except for the one scene where he loses the suit. He realizes he doesn't need to be an Avenger and just wants to protect the little guy. Then in the next movie he becomes an Avenger, so that's great. Let's start at the beginning, meaning the very first opening scene after the Mysterio setup. The snap. The death of trillions of people and the murder of over half the population, played off as one big fucking joke, laughing at the fact that people grew up when they were gone. Feels like they just shit on Endgame and all the emotional weight of it. I remember seeing all the test screener reactions, and by the way, they're all the same, so don't put so much weight in them. But one thing I specifically remember reading is, don't worry about questions after Endgame. Far From Home answers all unanswered questions well. Yeah, if you mean answering the emotional stakes of almost 4 billion people coming back and the emotional weight of all of it by making it a joke and calling it the blip, then yeah, handled it well. I honestly don't know what to do anymore, because it feels like with the MCU Spider-Man movies, they just go as far out of their way as possible to avoid any real emotional stakes and consequences, and instead just want to replace it with meaningless high school fluff. This is a really good point for the action set pieces in the movie, because in all of them, we see nothing. We see these elemental monsters destroying these buildings and all these cities, but they mean nothing to me because all I see is this CGI monster destroying a green screen with no emotional weight, because we don't see any people in danger. In between the action and Peter fighting in front of a green screen, we cut to his class in a comedy scene making jokes at the danger's expense, but we don't see any people getting hurt or affected by the city's destruction. All we see is what Disney demands, a CGI monster destroying an abandoned building with Spider-Man fighting him. No personal investment, just punching and fighting a monster. This is so evident in the final action set piece. Peter's class is trying to escape with Happy in again horrible comedic scenes, intercut with Spider-Man's action, but we never see the rest of Peter's class. Like they could have shown the rest of his class in danger and having him save them or something. What I think could have been an amazing scene would maybe be that Brad's in trouble and about to die, and even though Peter doesn't like him, he puts away his personal bias to do the right thing and save him, because he's Spider-Man, and even if he doesn't like it, it's his responsibility, because that's what it means to be Spider-Man. Not to do it for glory or to be an Avenger, but to do what's right, even if no one's watching. I guess this brings me to the whole MJ side of it. First of all, when did Peter start liking MJ? Write it down in the comments below. Oh, that's right, this fucking movie. It wasn't set up in Homecoming or any other movie, just established in the first 10 minutes of this movie that he really likes her and wants to give her a necklace to a girl he barely knows. I mean, apparently they're friends, presumably, because it's sure shit never shown to us, because that's what the MCU is. Implied emotional and character growth off screen. And no, her character saying that her name is MJ and that that's what her friends call her is no real character growth or the building of any meaningful relationship. To us, Peter's fascination with MJ is the same as his crush on Liz, because they both have equal weight to them. Peter doesn't know either of them and is just going on this giant assumption that they somehow like him. They hold the same emotional weight and complexity of zero because neither of them are shown any real depth. Mary Jane is supposed to be Peter's soulmate in life, and the whole reason that Peter likes her at the beginning of this movie is never explained or touched on. They could have set this up in Homecoming or Infinity War, saying that there's this girl that's important to him, or they could have just played the long game, setting it up gradually and creating an even more significant payoff in a further movie. But instead, the romance is introduced and concluded in one 2-hour movie with no emotional weight to the fact that she knows he's Spider-Man. And why does he like MJ and connect to her more than any other girl? Beats me. It's not shown. We don't understand or know anything about her character other than she's edgy. What is the weight or danger to knowing that he's Spider-Man? Because everyone who does know doesn't care and isn't put in any real danger. And no, his classmates being chased around by a drone with Happy does not count as real danger, because we all know none of those kids are actually going to die, because in the MCU, unless it's an Avengers movie, the only people who die are clueless innocent civilians or meaningless henchmen along with the villain. Maybe instead of saving Mysterio, Peter should have gone down there and saved his friends, facing the threat that he put them in. Whatever happened to I can't be with you and be Spider-Man, because no matter what I do, everyone around me will always be put in danger because of who I am.
No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, the ones I love will always be the ones who pay.
Oh, yeah. Never doing that again. I'm never doing that again.
No, now it's just the Spider-Man Friends fan club. Even in the smallest scenes, they can't have any stakes. Like when the flight attendant sees his Spider-Man costume, nothing happens. Then what's the point of having the scene in there if there weren't going to be any consequences? It was just for a quick gag, which is most of this movie, just high school comedy and meaningless jokes. If they wanted to add more meaning to that scene, why didn't they have like MJ see a glimpse of his costume or something, feeding into her suspicions, rather than this? I'm sorry, but I'll say this again, there is nothing worse to me than in comic book movies when there is no reason behind it, no passion for it, no heart, just filler, or as Rotten Tomatoes brilliantly puts it, a breezily unpredictable. Wait, what? Unpredictable? Did we watch the same movie? I could predict the plot from the first set image. Are you seriously telling me that when people saw the trailer and saw that Mysterio was the hero, people thought that was real? People really thought that they were going to make emotionless CGI monsters the real villains? Well, it wouldn't be a first for Marvel, but the breezy part definitely sticks. What I thought they were going to do was going to be like a Spider-Man 2 type thing, where after seeing his mentor die and going through this horrible traumatic event, he doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore. It's too much of a burden. He just wants to be Peter Parker and get the girl. Except that doesn't happen. There is no emotional trauma of him losing Tony, no PTSD of him dying and going to space, because that would be too deep for a Disney Spider-Man movie. No, give more scenes of him launching a drone strike on his classmates. That's a real hoot. There was so much potential here for them to really dive into, but instead, they went for cheap slapstick jokes that rarely hit. He's fine with being Spider-Man, but on his trip he just wants to take a vacation. Why is he emotionally overloaded? Is it because of the events of Endgame? Is he tired of the responsibility? Does he want to focus on his school? Just show us something. Don't sacrifice good character moments for a quick pace. Couldn't they have shown Peter's money struggles for going on a school trip? Showing he's not just like everyone else and needs to work 10 times harder to achieve the same? When did Peter Parker get all this money? Oh right, when he became an Avenger with Tony Stark. All the emotional struggles of him not having enough money are gone with Tony Stark, and they don't even address it. It's just another thing the MCU lets us assume. It's Peter Parker to not do what's easy, but to do what's right. He has to learn to not take the easy way out. In Spider-Man 1, he won't accept a job from Harry's dad because he didn't earn it. In the Spectacular Spider-Man, he tries just coasting by at ESU thinking it will get him an easy job, even if he's late and doesn't work the hardest, and ultimately he pays the price, losing his volunteer gig. Because that's the Peter Parker luck. He can never get ahead. He's always one step behind, chasing what he wants. And I think that's actually one of the few things this film gets right briefly. In the first act, even when they're focusing on the terrible comedy and humor, we get glimpses of the down-on-the-luck Spider-Man who can't catch a break with MJ. No matter what he does, he's always being sidelined, whether it be by Ned, the ridiculously over-the-top teacher, or Brad. But all that goes away when instead of making Brad just a normal guy, who happens to be doing more successful than Peter by no fault of his own, just because Peter Parker can't catch a break, they turn Brad into a stereotypical high school asshole. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about Brad in a minute. There's a little more though. Think about Spider-Man's struggles in this movie. They can all be solved by his technology. Instead of Spider-Man figuring out situations on his own as the grounded hero he is, instead we have a robotic suit that doesn't crease or move because it is entirely CGI, and that can save him at any moment. Vox wrote a great article about this, so check that out. And he's not even on his own in this movie because he always has S.H.I.E.L.D. to back him up. At least at the end of Homecoming, he had distanced himself from Tony and had to do it on his own. In this movie, he has Happy, Nick Fury, and Agent Hill, who are both awful. And it's not the performances. Trust me, I love Cobie Smulders and Samuel L. Jackson. But what the fuck were their characters, and why were they even here? Oh right, it's because Sony made a deal with Disney where they have to at least include 2 Marvel characters from other films. Well, hell of a choice. They do nothing in this movie but introduce Beck. Happy at least has character growth and goes down and helps the kids, but what the fuck do they do? And the real twist is the end credit scene. People have been hyping up the post-credit scenes for 2 weeks, saying it's the best thing since the original credit scene in Iron Man, and I think they were both fucking useless. The first one really had no purpose of being a post-credit scene and was probably only there to keep people in their seats. It should have just been the end of the movie because it's the same exact thing as the ending of Homecoming, and will have the same exact emotional consequences and weight of Homecoming. And as for J.K. Simmons getting a brief cameo, I mean, it was nice, but to me it just came off as the equivalent of something written in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon with a generic J. Jonah Jameson rhetoric. It's J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson without the brilliant writing or amazing directing from the Raimi movies. People were hyping it up so much that I was expecting like a live-action Spider-Verse tease, with Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield appearing. Hell, I'd even take Tom Hardy. Or maybe a Daredevil poster or an image of Wilson Fisk would have been nice. But no, just a mid-credit scene that should have been the end of the movie. And let's finally get to the real stinker of the post-credit scenes, the final one, where it's revealed that Nick Fury and Maria Hill were actually Talos and his wife the whole time. And then it shows Nick Fury at a Skrull base. I mean, like, do I even have to explain why that's stupid? Like, do you think anyone was actually like, oh, that's Talos. That's Talos, the Skrull from my favorite Marvel movie, Captain Marvel. Not only is it unnecessary, it actually damages the character progression of the film. Because as we see Peter's relationship barely grow with Fury, as he yells at him and then never sees him again, that is all taken away because it wasn't even Fury, it was Talos. Like Jesus Christ, what were they thinking? My very last point I'm going to make on the consequences is related to what is probably widely considered the worst part of the movie, the bus scene. There are so many things wrong with this scene, I'm going to try and piece them together for you. First of all, this scene does not fit into a Spider-Man movie. It feels like a throwaway gag that would be in a vacation comedy, like, well, you know, Vacation. Other great examples would be Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is directed by John Hughes. What do you know? No wonder. So in this scene, Peter gets the glasses, and they're called Edith, which stands for Even Dead, I'm the Hero. Really, you couldn't make it one movie without making a joke about him being dead. I mean, does that even sound like something Tony would have said in Endgame? Hadn't he learned his lesson and went on a real character arc? No, it's okay, just substitute it in for a quick throwaway gag. It's kind of becoming a theme. Also, whatever happened to Karen, his AI software that he talked to in the last one? Did they just forget about that while making it? Well, evidently they did because they CGI'd the Iron Spider suit over his normal suit in the beginning. He actually never wears his Homecoming suit once in the film. Once in a Mysterio delusion, but never for real. But moving on. So he puts the glasses on and wants to delete a picture of him half naked with the S.H.I.E.L.D. girl from Brad. Like seriously, how convenient. Of all the kids, the only one to walk in is Brad. And of course he's taking his clothes off, because it's not enough for him to get a new suit. He needs to undress so we can get a funny moment, setting up a short conflict that will result in another comedic set piece. So Peter accidentally launches a drone at Brad. So Flash gets in his way to extend the conflict and create a funny scene. So he knocks out Flash. Yeah, knocks him out. Can you imagine if any other version of Peter knocked out their version of the Flash? I mean, Joe Manganiello would probably try and kill Peter, and we already basically saw what would happen in The Amazing Spider-Man. But this Flash does nothing. Not even addressed.
When I say penis, you say bunker! Penis! Bunker! Penis! Bunker!
What happened to this version of the Flash? I used to like him. I liked how he wasn't a physical bully. I thought they were going to do something with his character. Anything. And they did. And Homecoming actually liked his character. In this movie, he literally does nothing. Why couldn't they have gotten rid of Brad and substituted Flash into being MJ's love interest? It would have created a more personal dynamic and rivalry between him and Peter, but no, let's just opt with the generic high school jerk we've never seen before. In The Amazing Spider-Man, at least they semi-redeemed Flash's character, making him apologize and feel bad when Uncle Ben dies.
Feels better, right? Like your uncle died. I'm sorry. I get it. I'm sorry. Okay.
For real though, the last thing I do want to touch on is the big emotional scene on the plane where Peter finally accepts that he can't be Iron Man, he's just going to be Spider-Man. Kind of the same arc as the last film, but whatever. And Happy tells him to not be Iron Man, to just be someone on his own. So of course, instead of Spider-Man figuring out on his own and building his own suit, he just uses the nifty shield tech that can fix all his problems. And I do like that he actually designed it himself, instead of Iron Man just making it for him and him accepting it, but still. And to cap it off, instead of him having his own Spider-Man themed moment while he's building the suit, or just a pop song augmented for the film like What's Up Danger and Spider-Verse, we get AC/DC, signifying that he's Spider-Man and not Iron Man Jr. Well, I think I've gotten my big rant about most of my gripes within the film done now, so now I'll just try and bring up some of the smaller things I didn't like. To say that the high school in Far From Home was accurate to real-life high school is probably the most ridiculous sentiment I've heard in a really long time. Everything about the school, from the students to the atmosphere to the general cleanliness of it, is just so incorrect. And maybe I can't accurately judge this, but I am currently attending high school. Now mine is public and not a prestige science academy, but that doesn't excuse Far From Home and Homecoming's Disney Channel PG version of what high school is. Throughout these movies, the word fuck and the idea of sex is never brought up once. And no, listener friends playing a game of fuck, marry, kill does not count. I'm talking about real. In my high school experience, you can't go one conversation without hearing the word fuck at least 10 times, not to mention saying it yourself. But even without the language, this is still a teen comedy. Like, are you kidding me? Ned and Betty start dating, and I swear it's the most cringe-inducing parental guide version of a relationship for kids I've ever seen. They don't do anything. She's not his fucking mom, she's not supposed to boss him around and remind him to take his vitamins. Kids in high school who are dating don't act like this. They didn't have to make Superbad where it's all about them wanting sex, but they could have done anything more than this. This Disney-produced horrible representation of what high school and relationships are like. It feels like 30-year-old screenwriters for Disney were trying to not even imitate actual high school, but literally do a parody of it. And the horrible representation of the teachers is just embarrassing. They didn't have to make them strict or geniuses, but to just have them be complete utter buffoons just to get cheap laughs out of the audience just reinforces the inaccuracy of high school in this movie. Like, I know that they sent Tom Holland to a real New York high school to prepare for his role in Homecoming. And like, are you telling me that real high school was in any way similar to what Homecoming was like, Tom? How is it that we have a Spider-Man movie where everyone is in their 30s, one where everyone is a freaking model, but somehow Homecoming and Far From Home are the least accurate versions of it? I wouldn't be surprised if in Homecoming at the party, they were all drinking soda or fruit punch because underage drinking and alcohol would hurt Disney's brand. And if I'm wrong, please tell me. Write down in the comments if your experience in high school was accurately depicted in these movies, because I'd really like to know. The relationship of Ned and Betty, I believe, is the perfect symbol of irrelevance for the movie. So in the end, when Peter and MJ finally get together, it means nothing. Why should I feel any different about Peter and MJ than how I feel about Ned and Betty, because they're both given the same amount of emotional build-up and weight to them? Ned and Betty get together, off-screen. Peter gets feelings for MJ, off-screen. Ned and Betty break up, off-screen. All jokes that mean nothing to the story. If they can just throw away Ned and Betty's relationship like that, why should I feel any investment in Peter and MJ's, given that we have no reason to not believe it will end up any differently than theirs? I don't want to endlessly compare this movie to Spider-Man 2, but in the end, when Peter finally gets to be with Mary Jane and tell her he's Spider-Man, it feels earned. The emotional payoff has been building up for 2 movies straight, with him having to let her go in the last one because the weight of being Spider-Man is too big for him to have and also be with Mary Jane, because sometimes getting the girl isn't good enough. Sometimes it's about being something more. It's about the responsibility of being Spider-Man. In this film, he gets to be Spider-Man, and he gets the girl, and that's fine, but the struggle is never shown. He never worries about what will happen if he tells her his secret, about what danger she'll be put in if she's his girlfriend. All this is sidelined to instead include more teenage comedy. It never shows why Peter wants to escape from being Spider-Man and wants to go after the girl. A 10-second scene of Peter looking at a painting of Iron Man before quickly cutting to a comedic scene of him packing isn't enough. Okay, let's just get to the last thing. I don't understand how people can think this is one of the best villains in the MCU. Take a minute and try and imagine the same exact villain played by any other actor. Yes, Jake Gyllenhaal does a good job, and a strong performance is a large part in what makes or breaks a character, but his performance doesn't change his character's weak motivation or muddled backstory that has no relation to Peter Parker. Think about why the Vulture worked so well in Homecoming. He had a similar background to Quentin Beck in this movie, but the real difference is that he actually had a connection to Peter and had a sympathetic factor to him that the audience could understand. He was a hard-working middle-class American trying to support his family when all of a sudden, because of Tony Stark, he's out of a job. And even though he's stealing and doing all these criminal activities, he's doing it all for the sake of his family. That was a good twist. What was the twist here? That Mysterio used to work for Tony Stark and was screwed over? Yeah, it's been done before. The Vulture had similarities to Spider-Man. Both were the poor, hard-working middle class, struggling to rise up while the rich and wealthy like Stark flourished. This is one of the few things Homecoming got right. But in this one, I thought they were going to do another mentor figure type thing where he betrays Peter, but they really don't even do that. Peter barely knows Mysterio, and then like 20 minutes later, he just gives him Tony's glasses, knowing basically nothing about him. This is the entirety of their relationship. He sees him defeat an elemental. He meets him. They have one talk after Fury yells at him. He watches him defeat another elemental. They talk in a bar, where Peter tells him about the girl he likes. Quentin says he looks bad in the glasses, and Peter sees Quentin looks good in the glasses, so he gives him the glasses. That's it. There's no personal connection between them, so Mysterio feels no remorse in needing to kill Peter. There's no moment of reconsideration with him, because he doesn't even know Peter. All he cares about is himself, and Peter obviously doesn't care about him as he just watches and allows him to die right in front of him. And in the next scene, he's all happy and in love with MJ, no emotional burden at all. Which brings me to another big point here, which is Mysterio's very weak motivation. So basically, he was the one who designed the glasses that Tony used in Civil War, and Tony took credit and fired him with his crew, I guess. And now he wants to be a hero, like Syndrome? Except Syndrome actually had a good plan, and, you know, a good motivation. He didn't want to be the hero, he wanted to show the true side of heroes, and make it so there are no heroes anymore. Why does Mysterio want to be a hero now? How does that relate to him being fired from Stark? He just destroys these towns and pretends to save them, but why does he need the glasses from Peter? What changes when he gets them? Can he inflict more damage now? Because he already had a fleet of drones at his disposal, so what changes? And his whole villainous monologue where he reveals his whole plan needed to be there to explain to the audience, but it's still extremely lazy and poorly put together. The way it's shot and edited implies it's a joke, but they actually want us to take it seriously? A little tonally inconsistent. There is one scene that I think was very well put together and well done. It's the scene that everyone is talking about and is easily the best scene in the entire movie by far. The visuals are actually imaginative, there's creativity present, the scenery is interesting, the colors are vibrant, Peter gets hit by a bus. Thank God he loses. The whole scene was great, but then we had to get to the third act, which was just so blech. I wish they had kept the CG monster before replacing it with the thousands of drones, because the drones were just so boring and visually uninteresting. At the end of the day, I think Jake Gyllenhaal did a great job with what he was given, and I think he made the best out of it by embracing the silliness of the situation. But that doesn't change the fact that we still feel no stakes or turmoil while Peter is fighting him due to their lack of relationship. Peter doesn't care if Mysterio dies, and neither do we. At the end of the day, Spider-Man is subjective. You may connect to this Disney Channel lighthearted Spider-Man, but I don't. And I hope they change. I hope they can make a Spider-Man movie that appeases all Spidey fans, like Spider-Verse. But I don't know if that's possible with Disney at the helm. I used to think that Marvel was going to create a Spider-Man for all of us, but instead it's just left us broken and divided, arguing over which incarnation appeals to us more. Ultimately, it's up to us to decide what we like, and we shouldn't allow anyone else to change that. So you can say this movie is shockingly spectacular, that it's the greatest live-action Spider-Man by far. You can say that this is your definitive Spider-Man, and your favorite iteration. Watch Mojo. But without all the bias and propaganda, just me, what you can't take away is that I love Spider-Man.
I never asked to be Spider-Man. I never asked for these powers. I never knew it would mean a bashed-up hand, a hard 9 p.m. curfew, no job, and friends who all think I'm scum. Easiest decision I ever made. Except I saved him.